But one of the things it showed was populations. And it had the current population of the United States right at around 335 million people, and in 2015, and then in 2025, population was down to 99 million. And you go, that's 70%.
70%. 70%.
We begin here with breaking news out of the Middle East. Dozens of people injured after Iran launched missiles at Israel.
This comes a day after Israel attacked Iran in an unprecedented show of force. And now the U.S. military is getting involved.
All right, cool. Well, John, why don't you introduce our guest for us today, since you guys are
Yes,
pretty close?
yes, of course. So we returning to buy their fruits. Of course, I wasn't in the original interview. That was the one that you did with Brian. Shout out to Brian. Hope you're doing well, brother. We have Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions. Glad to have you back here, Charlie, as always, brother. And definitely you plug where everybody can find you out there.
Macroaggressions.io is the brand new website. So that's a good place for people to go. You can find information about the podcast. You can find information about the books and everything, I think, connected to me. It's a brand new website. I kept it real simple and clean. And anyone that is interested in listening to the podcast, it's available in audio format just about anywhere. In video, you can catch it on Rockfin and Rumble and Band.video and Vigilante.tv. Because YouTube won't have me anymore. Isn't that funny?
Me either. They banned my second channel, so that's where we're at now. In the I guess there's probably going to be a swing back of censorship. I would say don't be surprised when X starts purging people before the end of before the election season. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but that may happen.
But they just said that they were going to nominate Elon Musk for the Nobel Prize for his amazing work on removing censorship. What are you talking about, John? I mean, he's our savior.
That is true, Charlie. I mean, Elon Musk is our guy with Neuralink and X, the whole X platform. He wanting to make it into the WeChat of America, right?
Possibly get wrong there.
Yeah, not at all. A social credit score, all finance in one platform with an X, right? Nothing at all could go wrong there. But it is concerning. It is concerning the way things are going. So it's going to be interesting to see what platforms are even left by the time election season occurs and by the time election season is over, the way things are going. A lot of people are going to be, again, I guess one last thing is Days of Noah had brought up on his channel. We played this clip. Shout out to Days. Elon Musk, I heard him literally say it. You have a freedom of speech in America, Charlie, but not a freedom of reach.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the difference then? I mean, if you just allow people to scream into the abyss, then I guess then technically they've given you free speech, but nobody gets to hear it. I don't know. I just, it's so funny because it depends on what you're talking about. You can talk about nonsense and it gets amplified and people are being force fed the information. You talk about something that's reasonable, rational, anchored in reality, backed with facts, and next thing you know, you're having to appeal a suspension. So it's just everything is a bit backwards these days. But I would suggest that is because when you start talking about these very real issues, then and you do it in a way that isn't, ranting and raving, but logical and making sense, then you threaten the establishment. The establishment doesn't like that. They have a very specific narrative that they want in whatever topic you're talking about. There's a way they want you to think about it, and if you fall outside of the established and agreed upon parameters, then they will do what they can to rein you back in, or at least trick you into thinking that you have the ability to reach people, when in actuality they basically have you on mute, whether you know it or not. And that was that's That's the theme that's running through a lot of the alternative media in particular, is that we might be on the platform, but we are very much limited in our exposure. So,
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
we
same
see
thing's
the
coming to
territory.
Rumble too. I would assume, right? I mean, and Peter Thiel's a big investor into Rumble.
Yeah.
That they try to be on the outside. At least that's what they're coming off as, so that people will flock to them. I mean, they know that people are just leaving YouTube left and right if they're not getting kicked off of YouTube and kind of heading over there into places like Odyssey. But I think that, like John said, come the election season, or as we get closer and closer to it, you'll start seeing them switch their game up.
Yeah,
Well,
they
I mean,
can't
people. I guess
have you talking.
one thing about Rumble, real quick, is anybody questioning the war in the Middle East right now. Israel coming against Palestine. Anybody who questions Zionism, they've been cracking down on Rumble, so much so that it's even within their terms of service about anti-Semitism, but not really defining what that specifically is. And none of us here are hateful people. I feel bad for the Israelis and the Palestinians because they're kind of forced by the elite to kind of pick a side. They have to advocate for. Now, obviously, the Palestinians were being treated far harsher than Israelis are themselves in Israel. But the moment that even if you just have a balanced approach to it, you get censored for that. And so that's something that I would say, Charlie, to look out for, with you being on Rumble this year, is they might really start cracking down on anybody who talks out against Zionism.
Yeah, for the first time, I just started a Rumble channel about I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and I just looked at sort of the analytics, the behind the scenes, what was going on, and I am happy to announce that I have earned a grand total of $6 from my ads in the last couple of.
Savage.
So they better not cut off my revenue stream, or I'm going to be in real trouble.
I guess they
The mortgage
are,
breaker.
But
Well,
go ahead, go
did
ahead.
you guys hear about the 8x8 complex that Egypt is building in the middle of the Sinai Desert?
I saw a little something about that. Boy, I mean, if I didn't know any better, it looked like an open air prison to me, right?
That's what I was gonna say, in the middle of the desert, really. But it's like th- they're saying it's for refugees, but it sounds something like the Nazis would say. I'm just saying. You know
Yeah,
what I
they
mean? So
resettled in the South this time instead of
yeah,
resettled in the East. Yeah.
exactly.
I
And
have heard was something that real quick. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeremy. Something I just want to mention.
you're good.
Something that me and Aaron Falkman, friend of the show, talk about a lot is it does seem like there is a possibility, even biblically, this might even line up to as well, where if they do empty out the West Bank, where are those Palestinians going to go? And the way it looks like is they're not going to go to Egypt because they're not going to be accepted there the way it looks like. It looks like it's likely that Saudi Arabia will take them in, and then some of them will work for Neom,
Mhm.
because it seems that they're ready for they have like housing available that you can look up for like workers there in Neom that's already done, right? So there'll be like slave labor in Neom, right? And then some of the Palestinians, of course, would join the Houthis, right? The rebels, it seemed like that would fight. So that seems sadly what's probably going to end up happening. And it's going to be, I don't want, if it's God's will, it's God's will, but I'm not cheering for Christian brothers and sisters over in Palestine, or even the Muslims, to be displaced from their homes, and to be forced into slave labor or terrorism. Neither one of those are good things.
Two bad
So
options. Yeah. Yeah. But it's a horrible situation. I always try to remind myself that I think that probably many of the Israelis feel about their government the way I feel about my government, which is, hey, don't lump me in with these lunatics. I'm not in favor of, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the invading, bombing Libya back to the Stone Age and things like that. You say America's doing that. I hope that the people that say that make the distinction between the American government and the American people. And I try to remind myself about that as well when talking about the Israelis, and then they have to specify the Israeli government and not necessarily the Israeli people. I'm sure some of them, I'm sure many agree with what the government is doing, but certainly not all of them. And I think that there's pockets of sanity in these countries that don't connect with their state doing the things that they're doing. It's
Yeah, that's
disgusting and
true.
it's sad, and I feel for
That is
them.
true. And thinking, and just, I mean, this might be a good segue into it, but like speaking of the Israelis, the Israeli population is the most heavily, I'm just gonna say because we don't go on YouTube. They're the most heavily vaccinated per capita country on the planet, and I think that that'd be a good segue into like what our main topic is going to be today, and that is the Deagle report, the vaccination status, and the SARS was it SARS-CoV-2
Two.
document that yeah. There was another document similar, not similar to the Deagle document, kind of just predicting what's going to happen. But I'll let Charlie come and break that down for us.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and while you guys are talking, I'm gonna see if I can find my notes on the episode I did called "Where Did All the People Go," where I really kind of focused on the well, I focused on the overlap between Deagle report, the World Health Organization's actually it was the CDC. It was the Center for Disease Control, but there was an international component to it, which broke down uh, all of the countries and ranked them in terms of percentage of who took the shots and who didn't. And I didn't really know what I was doing when I put that together. I mean, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just looking to see if I saw anything. And unfortunately, what I saw was that the percentage of countries that were heavily vaccinated was lining up with the Deagle report. And actually I found it in a roundabout way. The countries that were at the bottom of the CDC's list for the least vaccinated. And when I say least vaccinated, it started at I think 50, I've got my notes here now. It started at I think 51% was the least vaccinated. And in fact, let me escape from mere generalizations and just tell you exactly what the countries were that I found. So the Deagle report, I guess you want me to just start at the beginning and explain what the
Yeah.
Deagle report is?
Yeah, because I've
Okay.
seen a lot of people talk about it. I've seen it online. I've seen, looked at it myself too as well. But yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, so Deagle is a company. It's a military industrial complex think tank. It's a company that can tell militaries around the world, based on what's going on now geopolitically, what we think is going to happen in the next couple of years, where your country is geographically, what your treaties are, who your neighboring countries are, like basically what the climate is for a war breaking out in your area. You should plan on buying X number of helmets over the next 5 years, right? Or this many pairs of boots, or this many night vision goggles, or whatever it is. So it's a logistics company. So they're trying to help you figure out. A company would hire them to help them figure out what they want to what the forecast is moving forward for the sort of supplies that you're going to need to run a military. And so Deagle is very good at looking into the future and analyzing trends. And I remember I wrote my first book, The Octopus of Global Control. I wrote it in 2016 and the first half of 2017, and it went out in 2017. So I remember the Deagle seeing this chart that Deagle put out. And what it did, I must have seen the chart in 2014. So probably, because the chart shows two columns of numbers. Basically, one is where things are in 2015 and then where things will go in 2025. So it's a 10-year look. 2015, either they were predicting this is what it's going to be in 2015, but it was only like a year or so ahead of schedule, or maybe it even came out in 2015. I'm not really sure, but either way, I remember reading it and going, okay, this is weird. If this is true, then it's weird. And it was on their website. It wasn't like somebody pulled it down and manipulated it. But one of the things it showed was populations. And it had the current population of the United States right at around 335 million people, and in 2015, and then in 2025, population was down to 99 million. And you go, that's 70%. So my next thought was, well, okay, so if roughly 230 million people just up and left, where did they go? Are we going to see corresponding in-migration numbers in Canada and Mexico, which would be the most logical places? The answer is no. They were down 70% as well. All right, well, so where did all these people go? Right? If they're not here, where are they? They don't really talk about that. I mean, it comes out later that they said that the population decline was due to a pandemic and an economic collapse, but they don't go into details about that. Now, when you're reading this in 2015, you're going, I don't know, sounds feasible, maybe. If you say so. But when you get into 2020 and you get into 2021 and you start to see a pandemic, and you start to see the solution to the pandemic being we're going to inject everybody with things. Because I knew what I knew about the pharmaceutical industry going into this, I was very uncomfortable with the solution being vaccines. And pre-COVID, by the way, I mean, just in general, I'm no fan. And there's a lot of evidence, though it gets demonized and suppressed, but there's a lot of evidence showing that vaccines are extremely dangerous. They have been for a long, long time. And but there's a lot of money in it, so nobody really talks about it. So I started looking at this Deagle chart, and I'm thinking, well, maybe they know something we don't know. I mean, we know how these things play out. A lot of this is planned well in advance. And so maybe there's something to it, but you don't really focus on it or dwell on it too much because it's kind of, you don't really have the information you don't have the ability to fact check them. So here comes 2022. And I find the CDC international, and it shows basically it's very, very helpful because what it should now usually the CDC is just America centric, but for whatever reason they had a international component to it, and there was quite a bit of detail. So it breaks down like. I wrote everything down from it. It breaks down who's taken the shot in terms of age ranges. So they've got 65 plus, they've got 50 to 64, they've got 18 to 49. These are age ranges. Then they've got 12 to 17, and then they have 5 to 11. And within those, they then break it down further. This is for America. We're just talking about America here. Then they break it down further into fully vaxxed, which is 2 shots plus 2 boosters. Or no, I'm sorry, 2 shots. 2 shots is fully vaxxed. Then you've got first booster and second booster. So you look through the numbers and you can find it. I broke it down based on age. So in the 65 and older category, in terms of how many Americans are fully vaxxed, meaning they took the 2 shots, no boosters, that is 91.9% of people that are 65 and older in America 91%, almost 92%, let's round up, close enough, of that age range, which works out to 50.4 million people. They have, out of a total of 54.7 million people, 92% of them took the first 2 shots. Of those that took the 2 plus a booster, that number drops down to 64.8%. And then all 4 shots, that breaks down to 25.8%, or roughly 14.1 million people in the 65 and older age range. So when you start to look at these numbers, you can break it down one by one. And so what I did was I took the numbers that the CDC was giving me in terms of how many people. First, I did America, but then I looked internationally. And the numbers that the CDC gives for the international, what you find is that the ones with the lowest uptake in vaccination, the countries that didn't take it for whatever reason, those countries, let me read them off to you. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I've got. Okay.
Oh, you're good.
Here we go. We've got the bottom, the lowest uptake for countries that were getting on board with the vaccine was Sudan, Congo, Kenya, Madagascar, Iraq, Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea, and Yemen. Okay. Some African, some, Middle East, Papua New Guinea out in the Oceania. So those are the lowest uptakes in vaccination rates, right? Then I go to the Deagle report. And there are very few countries in the Deagle report that are not experiencing losses of population. There's only like a handful, dozen or so, that actually didn't see a decrease in population. They saw an increase in population. Those countries are Papua New Guinea, Yemen, Sudan, Congo, Kenya, Iraq, Madagascar. So they're the same list that was the lowest countries of uptake. Now, the Deagle report showing population increases in these countries was from that original 2015 chart. It's not a new chart. They didn't manipulate it. It wasn't put together after the vaccine uptake was so low. This was out years in advance. So I just thought it was very unusual, coincidental, maybe even correlated. I'm not sure. Not a statistical analyst. I'm just a guy that understands logic and reason and knows that these people are bloodthirsty depopulationists, eugenicists. And I saw that and I thought there's a lot of overlap with this list. By the way, the countries that were seeing the 70% decrease in their population: United States, Germany, Israel, France, Spain, Australia, Italy, Canada, Norway, Ireland, Lithuania. These were on the Deagle report. You're looking at the UK losing 77% of their population. USA losing 68.5%, Germany losing 65%, Israel 48%, France, Spain, both around 41%. These are massive. Ireland losing 72% of its population. You go, oh my God, these are terrifying numbers.
And this is according to them, by 2025, right?
Right. And then you go, I wonder which countries have some of the highest vaccination rates according to the CDC. USA, Japan, Mexico, Germany, UK, France, Thailand. It's all the same ones. You know what I mean? It's all the same ones. And where you've got China fully vaxxed, meaning 2 shots, no booster. at 89.7%. You know, these are 12.4 billion shots given worldwide. 12.4 billion doses given worldwide. 606 million shots just in the United States. 79 million shots given in California alone. So 78% of America has had at least one shot. That's according to their numbers. Now, again, if people have problems with the numbers, that's fine. I can understand but I'm just saying that, and I might even have problems with some of the numbers, but I'm just saying these are the numbers that comes from the CDC's site. So you can make your calculation adjustments accordingly, but these are the numbers that they are putting out. And it's alarming to me. And so my question in that episode was that is this depopulation? I mean, is it an aspect of depopulation? I know that depopulation is very real. I know that eugenics is not some theory. It's British Eugenics Society. Sir Julian Huxley ran it for years and years and years until the heat was so bad on them because the term eugenics was depopulation that Julian Huxley said we need to rebrand because we're getting killed out here. You know, I mean, they're on to us. We need to rebrand. So he suggested we rebrand to a new name. That new name is transhumanism. So he invented the term transhumanism. And so when you hear Klaus Schwab and the boys talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and they ask, well, what is the fourth industrial revolution? And they say transhumanism. What they're really talking about is eugenics. They're talking about thinning the herd. That's their term for it, not mine. So this is a difficult topic and a heavy one, as you mentioned at the beginning with the disclaimer, we ignore it at our own peril because these people are very serious. They have a complex about them. They think that they are in charge. They think that they decide who lives and dies. And they think that this whole governing business would be a whole lot easier if it wasn't for these people. And this isn't a new idea. It's just that never has it been possible on such a massive scale, aside from, war, which does a really good job of thinning out the herd. But the idea that you could convince everybody through a television set in their or a computer screen at their house to go out and inject themselves with an unproven, untested, rush to market magic potion that may or may not kill you today, tomorrow, or within the next 10 years. You get people to depopulate themselves with this by keeping them away from solid information and facts, and instead radicalizing them and convincing them that a virus is right around the corner that's going to kill them, and it puts them in a very susceptible state of mind, a very fight or flight way of thinking, where they're not making long-term calculations. They don't know if they're going to be around. They don't know if they're going to be around next week, let alone, what this thing will do to me in 5 years. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I just need to get out of this current situation. This virus is going to kill me. Never mind that even the statistics they gave us said it had a survivability rate of 99.98% and a median death age of 80 in the US. The median death age in the US is 79. So, I mean, anybody that had just rudimentary math skills and the ability for critical thinking would take one look at this and go, so let me get this straight. If I do nothing, I have a 99.98% chance of making it out of here. I've asked people this question. If you took a math test in high school and you got a 99.98% on it, would you ask the teacher for extra credit? Probably not. What if the extra credit could give you myocarditis and kill you?
Right.
So the maximum upside you can only get to 100%. So the maximum upside that this magic potion can give you if it does everything that it is supposed to, that they say it's going to do, and it works perfectly, is 0.02%, you're going to trade in all of the questionable health conflicts for 0.02%. That's a bad statistical analysis of the situation. You're better off doing nothing. So it, we're going to look back on this time as like, well, mistakes were made, as Rumsfeld would say. Mistakes were made. No, mistakes weren't made. This was calculated. This was designed and this was made to happen. And the fear campaign that they used on the people was not a mistake. It was intentional. They knew the stats. They were giving us stats. They told us what was going on. You just had to be able to see it. So, it took this. So anyway, when I came across this information, I debated whether or not to even do the episode. I called my partner on it, Tony Merkel, and I said, listen, I've come across something and I've got this episode and it's really heavy. And it's like, and I don't know whether or not I should do it. I'm a little conflicted because I'm not trying to scare everybody here. And I've never wanted to be wrong about something so much in my life too. But this is what I found, and this is what it is. He says, okay, he goes, why don't we do this? Why don't you just record it and then send it to me? Because I don't do anything live. So why don't you record it and send it to me and I'll listen to it and then we'll have this conversation. I said, okay, fair enough. Let's do that. So I recorded it, I sent it over to him, and I got a call the next day and he said, you have to put this out. You absolutely have to put, not this, there's no debate. This information needs to go out, and so that people can assess it and take a look at it and see for themselves how they feel. And so I said, okay. I mean, I trust Tony's judgment completely. And I was thinking I wanted to put it out, but if he said, oof, man, I don't know, I would have deferred to him on that. But he was very adamant that it needed to go out. So I put it out. It turned out to be the most downloaded episode of macroaggressions ever. It's called "Where Did All the People Go?" If people are interested in finding it, it came out. I'm not even totally sure. 2 years ago, I think it was fall of 2022, and it became the most downloaded macroaggressions episode I've ever had, and the video of it went like all over the place. I was getting interview requests in like Japan and places. It was very, very strange. It kind of took on a life of its own. And, I mean, I kind of wish other episodes would have gotten that treatment as opposed to this one, but maybe this one, I don't know. Maybe I found something that other people didn't find at that time and they connected with it. I'm not sure. Again, like you said, to begin this, like I'm not trying to scare people. And I fully recognize that this information is a bit scary. And so for that, I apologize. But also I kind of feel like, well, would you rather know this information and deal with it and process it, or just be left in the dark? Some people want to be left in the dark. Some people don't want to know that this exists because they throw their hands up and go, hey, what am I going to do about it? You know what I mean? Who cares? If I know, what am I going to stop it? Am I going to put an end to Fauci? No. But I feel like you just kind of need to hear it and you need to know it. And I like to work with facts and I like to work with statistics to the extent that I can. And man, what I found was just deeply scary and alarming. So that's why
Yeah,
we're
I
here.
found it personally, man. I found it the most important episode I've ever listened to in a podcast myself. I showed my wife, I showed a whole bunch of people that because I think that the information provided is not only mind blowing, but it's also one of those things that it hits close to home. I mean, think about how many one of us, each and every one of us, knows somebody who's fully vaxxed,
Yeah.
you know? And what I see coming personally is that, you got the World Economic Forum warning about disease X, and you have Jeremy Jurgen talking about how another crisis is coming and blah blah blah, right? There's plenty of possibilities of what that might be, and I personally think it might be a conglomerate of things. But when all these people, if all these people just kind of start dropping dead all around us, you know, they potentially would be able to blame it on another disease instead of the vax itself.
Yep.
Therefore, they can roll out another vax because that's what they're doing right now. They're creating another one already.
And that is part of their that has been part of their strategy for a while. When I said that vaccines are very dangerous, part in pre-COVID, part of this is they set up something called the VAERS court back in 1986, the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System. And that is where you're supposed to go to report if you've had an adverse effect. Your doctor is supposed to go there and report it and say, we had an issue. Guy went into anaphylactic shock or something. Something happened and this guy had a bad reaction to it. And I put it in, you put it in the system and then it goes in there. Well, the reality is that only about 1% of adverse effects actually get reported to the VAERS system. And if you go through that and you have an adverse effect, your chances of collecting money from that is very slim, but money does get paid out. The money doesn't come from the pharmaceutical companies. The money comes from the consumer. Every shot that's sold, 75 cents from every shot goes into this general pool. And then that money is used to compensate victims of vaccine damage. Now, that fund has paid out, just to put it in perspective, $4.2 billion to settle vaccine claims. Never autism claims. You come with an autism claim, it will automatically be thrown out. They won't even open that door. But if you think about it this way, 1% of the actual adverse effects have been reported from vaccines, excluding autism. But only 1% has been brought to VAERS attention. And through that system, they've paid out $4.2 billion. That this is as of a couple of years ago. It's probably larger than that. So if you do the math and make it proportional so that let's say that everybody knew the VAERS system existed and that every doctor actually reported it, then that 1% would be 100 times bigger. It'd be 100%. Therefore, that payout theoretically would need to be 100 times bigger. So if you had $420 billion being paid out by the VAERS system, that'd get your attention. So nobody knows about this. And that is that's part of the problem, is that they've really sort of controlled what you're allowed to talk about when it comes to vaccine damage. And every one of the major vaccine manufacturers are convicted felons. They've all been found guilty in courts of law of felonies. They should be let out in handcuffs. Nobody ever is. The largest criminal fine in the history of planet Earth has been paid by pharmaceutical companies for their crimes against humanity. They're very dangerous. It is a huge moneymaker for them. They keep you sick, just sick enough so that they've got a patient for life. Ideally, they won't kill you. They're not trying to kill you with the vaccines. They're trying to compromise you so that you remain a customer forever. This is a medical system that when you dig back into its roots, what you find is that it was established by the Rockefellers. And so if you know anything about the Rockefellers, not good people. Medical schools, also controlled by the Rockefellers, started by the Rockefellers. You can read something John, I'm sure, has done work on the Flexner report, where you go into the details of how these universities sort of got their credentials and why some went away and others rose to prominence. And you start to recognize certain schools that are held out. Oh, Johns Hopkins, they're in charge of all this. Well, Rockefeller connected. So the industry from its inception was created to harm people in ways that the general public isn't aware of. So it's not so much that COVID came around and that COVID vaccines are like an outlier as a dangerous medical procedure. There's been dangerous medical procedures for a while. This is just the most recent one, the one that you really want to get into. So that, the history of shots and the suppressing of the side effects has been going on in the United States since at least the mid 80s. And my assumption would be it's been suppressed even further from that. But things that people don't know, the Centers for Disease Control, they own patent, they set the vaccine schedule. They say you have to have 79 shots by this age, and this is how we do it. And we do, and they set the vaccine schedule. And part of, and then, and they also own patents on the vaccines, which is just a tremendous conflict of interest, which you would think should never happen. Of course, it happens. But my point to answer your question is that when they set that schedule, one of the things they do is that there's a vaccine here, and then another one there, and another one a couple months later, and another one a couple months later, and another one a couple months after that, and another one a couple years after that, and another one 5 years after that. Now, if you come down with autism, as an example, and you go to the VAERS court and you say, not that they would let you talk, but if you could, you'd say, I'm vaccine damaged and I have autism because of vaccines. And their response to you would be, which one did it? And you go, I don't know. Because you can't really tell, because if you take all the vaccine shots that you've taken and you look at them, you can't necessarily put your finger on any one. You can't say it was definitely this one, unless you hadn't taken any. And we, of course, we know from time to time we get these stories. A mother who's got an 18-month-old and baby was vibrant and communicating, making eye contact, doing all those things, going for an 18-month wellness check, get a round of vaccines. Next day, kid doesn't talk. Kid doesn't make eye contact. It never does from that point on. You're pretty sure whatever they got at that point is the culprit. But from a legal standpoint, they go, was that the only shot you got? Well, I got the vitamin K at birth and I got this. And what could have been that? Everyone does this. The Spider-Man the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other. Could be that guy. Could be that, So it's plausible deniability. And it creates a situation where you can't pin it on any one. And because you can't do that, it's hard to say what's causing it. So when you mention disease X and you say we're getting into a point where they've already got vaccines set up for that, of course, I mean, I don't doubt it. But when people start dropping dead from that, how are they going to be able to say it was disease X, or it was the vaccine for disease X, or maybe it was COVID? Maybe it was long COVID. Maybe it was the COVID vaccine that gave it to you. Same thing. It's plausible deniability. It's how can you tell me with certainty that it was this one particular shot that got you, because you're loaded up with all these other ones. It's reasonable or possible or feasible, or a defense attorney could make a strong enough case to say, well, you can't be certain that it was this one. It could have been the other ones. So that is another way that they muddy the waters on all of this, because you can't you may know in your heart, you may know in your head as well what did it, but from a legal standpoint, it's very difficult to get through that. And they know that, and they rely on that, and that's what we will see moving forward, I'm sure.
Well, Pfizer was ahead of the game when this current vaccine started rolling out, right? They right away, right at the very beginning, they made that liability. Like nobody can even charge Pfizer specifically for any type of vaccine damage. I mean, they put that into law as soon as right before it rolled
Or
out.
Moderna.
Or Moderna.
J&J.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, and maybe I think they knew the potential risks. I mean, I remember in your episode that you broke down like the statistics of you possibly getting myocarditis or any one of these symptoms from the vaccines, depending on how many you took.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have those notes, but you wrote that down. You broke all that down within that episode too. And man, like you see these 20-year-old kids, soccer players, literally the most in shape, healthy people on the planet just dropping dead or having a heart attack in the middle of the field, during practice, things that nobody's ever really seen before until this even rolled out. And you can see how brainwashed, the populace is when they don't even question it.
Oh, we've always had defibrillators at next to playgrounds, don't you know?
Yeah, kids have always been having a heart attack. Like what? It's crazy. It's crazy because you would think that like me, you and John and plenty of other people can see all these things going on and logically come to the conclusion that it's obviously the vaccine. Obviously. But there are so many I don't even know if I would say surprisingly, but there are so many people who just can't connect the dots.
Yeah, for a
It's
variety of
scary.
reasons.
Yeah, of course. They've been brainwashed their entire life, first of all, and they're being pumped with all the fear and all the misinformation from the government. And they're also, it plays into this whole left right paradigm, like Republicans are more like, and I don't fall into either category, but I'm just saying like the left are more likely to believe whatever the government tells them. The right is more less likely to believe and kind of have more of a free thought on it.
Yeah.
Like that whole type of thing. It's just like this whole culture and this whole environment built around us is is keep people dumb, keep people divided. And of course, you can see that they're using it against us now. Those who speak out, we're the crazy ones, we're the dumb ones, we're the divided ones.
Yeah.
And it's weird when it's like looking at it's like looking from the outside into a box, and you just see all this fighting and nonsense and craziness going on, and you have the answer, and it's almost like you can't tell them the answer. You have no way to
Right.
communicate the answer to them, and you just have to watch it. It's sad.
So I broke it down in terms of damage, side effects, and issues like that. I broke it down into three categories: short term, medium term, and long term. Short term would be 0 to 30 days, the first 30 days after the shots. The sort of damages that you would get were blood clots, myocarditis, strokes, heart attacks, spontaneous abortions, pulmonary embolisms. That's in the first 30 days of the shots. So, and we saw those people. We saw the people that just fell over, in the administration facilities, see somebody fall over, everyone's in line to get shots, and one person who's at the front of the line gets up, he's walking out to leave the place and falls over, right? Drops dead. That was happening. But then there's a medium term, which is from after you've gotten through that first month after being jabbed all the way through the end of the first year. So month 1 through month 12, you've got VAIDS, vaccine acquired immune deficiency syndrome. People that are, by the way, on a side note, some people that have had 2 shots and 2 boosters, if they take an HIV test, they'll test positive for HIV. And that'll get your attention. That'll get you divorced, probably. Your spouse going, "What are you doing behind my back?" You're like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. It's these shots." Oh yeah, right. Oh, the shots gave you HIV? Sure. Not some prostitute in some brothel somewhere, You're like, "No, honey, I
Right.
swear, I swear." No, really. But in reality, people are testing positive for HIV from vaccine AIDS. You have autoimmune reactions, you have heart failure, you have prion-like neurological destruction, you have ADE. That's just what's on your docket for year 1. And then moving into the long terms, so this is after the first year and moving from the 13th month on until till 10 years. Then you have more latent issues that can show themselves over time. And again, if you think about this in terms of like, who do you put the blame on? Who do you put the blame on when 7 years from now you develop a cancer from this? You just throw your hands up and go, it's bad luck, right? You don't know. Spike protein induced chromosomal damage, infertility, severe immunodeficiencies, suppressed DNA repair, fatal autoimmune disorders. So, once you get out into this time frame that isn't 30 days, you're past 30 days, it's really hard to pin anything down and put the blame on this stuff. Now, we've heard turbo cancer, which was a term that I had never heard before, fast acting soft tissue cancers and things like that. John knows, I'm sure, way more about this than I do. If you're a couple years down the road and you're infertile, can you blame Fauci at that point? I mean, legally, probably not. But even then, you might not even connect those dots. So I think that people need to recognize that this didn't just, yes, we saw the newscasters tipping over and we saw the guys dropping on the soccer pitch and all of that. And that was very real. But that's only one component of the response to this. That's short-term stuff. I mean, we're now in the medium, we're for a lot of people, they're through the medium phase and moving into the long term. And these are things that'll get you, that take a while to show up. So does it take till 2025 for Deagle's report to be true? I mean, if you launch it in the campaign in 2021, you've got all of 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 5 years. That's a pretty long time. I mean, I'm obviously not pushing for these numbers that Deagle put out to be true, but if they are, then this is where the long-term component comes into play. And when you start looking at these numbers of like how many people in these countries, Japan, 81.5% fully vaxxed, which means 2 shots, 78% boosted. That's a lot. As opposed to, interesting point to make here, China, top of the list. I think Israel didn't wind up on my list, but I think Israel probably is the top of the list, but I didn't have it on this chart. But China at 89.7% with the 2 shots, 0% for the boosters. They didn't offer. So, something to consider. But you've got Vietnam with 83% for 2 shots and 65% boosted, and Turkey right at around 63 and 48%, UK 65 and 51%, France 81% and 65%. These are not inconsequential countries too. This isn't like some obscure Central African country you've never heard. It's not the Democratic Republic of Congo or Chad or someplace like this. We're talking about France. If 2/3 of the people in France have taken 2 shots plus at least 1 booster, France is in a catastrophe. But of course, these numbers match up with what Deagle said. Deagle was showing 65% drop.
Charlie, can I ask you a few questions?
Of course, yes.
Okay. The Deagle report.
Mhm.
Deagle itself, if I remember correctly, and I try to trace back its earliest inception on the Internet Wayback Machine, appeared to be originally a forum type system, and then kind of evolved where anybody could anonymously write articles and post them onto the website, right? So it's projections that they had for the 2025 projections.
Mhm.
We really don't know exactly where they came from, correct? Like, we have no idea whether it was from a government agency, whether it was as a part of psychological warfare,
Right.
or psychographical warfare purposely planted on there,
Right.
to get people, like, we don't know, right?
We don't know. And what we do know is that it stayed on their website for years, because I remember reading it pre-Octopus book and then going back and looking at it again, just going, to take a look again, and it's still there. It was still there in the same numbers. I haven't checked in a while. I doubt it's there. It's gotten a
not
lot
there.
of
I went and looked. They
not there
they
anymore.
removed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah, I
not
found
too
it.
surprised. So
Yeah, I
so
found it on some like obscure post, but the numbers were the same. What you're talking about, I remember seeing those numbers on there.
No, they
It
are.
just wasn't
yeah,
from their website, yeah,
and that is the
anymore.
disclaimer too, John, of course,
Yeah.
is that I can't say where their numbers came from.
Well, they talk about the fall of the Western civilization in a disclaimer, right? That they think that that's going to occur. They put that after COVID. And we really don't the only information we can come out as far as like a domain registry is a man named Deagle out of Spain, but there's not really any information about why the website's there. There's not really like, even if you go back to earliest inception of the Internet Wayback Machine and you try to click on like the About Us page to try to get any information about it, it's blocked. It refers you to some sort of contact submission form. And so that information is memory hold. And I'm not saying, that the numbers don't, add up. They do. But again, it's either something that will occur or it's something that is put into the mindset of the population to instill fear. And I mean, you even have, they mentioned the WikiLeaks Stratfor leak, right? And then you have which, by the way, funny aside about that, there is emails to an Alex Jones in that Stratfor leak. Now, funny enough, I think it is to the Alex Jones. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you go back and look, there are emails from Stratfor, which is based in Austin, Texas, to Alex Jones in those leaks. Funny enough. But there is they do reference a Deagle article in there. Now, granted, was it the guy writing the Stratfor article and he couldn't find really anything about the write-up about the missile that he was discussing, and he kind of just like referenced Deagle because he's like, oh, because people do that all the time. That's how bad academia is with publishing articles, right?
Right.
References are really garbage in a lot of ways. But then again, you could even argue, well, was the WikiLeaks leak, even with the Podesta emails later on, was all this psychological warfare to build up for Trump in 2016. And then now, I don't know. When you start thinking about it, we have no idea. But I know that the COVID vaccines are bad. I've never once ever suggested anybody to get one, nor would I. They've caused a lot of issues, and we're continuing finding out more and more information as time goes on. That the studies are showing that the vaccines, they're kind of like moving the goalposts. But is that by design? Which is a whole nother question I want to ask you later. But it's like, that's my only, concern about this is, and I know it's something that we always think about, is how much are we getting played?
Right.
And it's tough, because, as you've talked about with the vaccines, if I remember correctly, the 1% was like a Harvard study, if I remember correctly.
Harvard Pilgrim 2009 study.
Yes. And I remember too, the way that most people kind of like push that off to the side is they say, well, it could be an adverse reaction like a rash, something as simple as that, right? And yeah, I get it. You're going to have some of those reactions to people that take medications or people that take vaccines. Right. They'll have something simple as like pain in the injection site,
Right.
But it's obviously the majority of these vaccines have severe side effects and cause, lasting comorbidity issues, So, I mean, I myself am not for vaccinations. But it's interesting to see. I guess one final thing, and this is a question I'm going to ask leading up to this, is there a possibility through the mRNA technology, which China didn't use mRNA, right? They used inactivated COVID virus, supposedly. Okay, Sinopharm, right? Was it more experimentalism in that they've talked about depopulation for so long, but is that really their true objective? Instead, they need to keep us around as guinea pigs to give us the mRNA to see what happens, right? Like they're testing it for something where I don't have an answer of why they're testing it, okay? Whether it's, as an effect as a weapon of some sort, a genetic weapon of some sort, or maybe some sort of medicine for the elite, which would be like longevity purposes? I don't have an answer to that question. But is there a possibility that, yes, some people are going to die, when you're testing on guinea pigs, that's going to happen and they don't care. But is there a possibility that that's their goal? Because we have the tracking through Operation Warp Speed, through Operation Tiberius Kirk, where Palantir is tracking literally every single person that ever tested for COVID-19 in a clinical setting or has gotten a vaccination, and your past, present, and medical data, they claim it's anonymized, I don't believe it is put in a database, and you're tracked literally for 10 years. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think
So
that's
why all that data? Why all that data? Unless you're a guinea pig and they're testing it on you, right?
right. Well, listen, when you're a closeted depopulation aficionado, then you've got a lot of flexibility with these shots, because if the worst case scenario everyone dies, well, you want that anyway. But in the absence of that, let's test people. I am of the belief, and I must say this about vaccines too, because I know some people are probably screaming, but it's not, vaccines don't hurt every person every
That's true.
time. Some people don't have responses to it. I talked to a pediatrician about vaccinations, and he said the way he thought of it was like this, that let's say that you've got to have 5 things hit in order for it to kick your kid into the autism spectrum. And maybe household exposure to some, EMFs or something like that is one of them. Maybe one of them is just genetic predisposition, and maybe something is, your environmental features, and then maybe the fifth and final one is that vaccine. Boom! Once you get that, it triggers it. So it's a compounding effect. Possibly, he said that he thought it could be a part of it, but that could explain why not everybody gets sick every single time. But I would also say that you mentioned Palantir, you mentioned them tracking and testing this stuff. Well, these are scientists, mad scientists, of course, but one of the things that they would do was, it would be reasonable for them, if they are in the tracking and tracing and mapping and watching this, is they would send out some batches that are placebos, some batches that have nothing in it. And they'd send some batches that are hot doses, and they'd set some that are medium strength, and they would
Yeah.
test to see who got what based on the batch number. And they'd say, well, these people, oops, we sent the real hot doses are the ones that people just keel over and don't even make it out of the facility. And that happened quite a bit. That was captured on camera, and even
Because they were tracking something I want to mention to you. Operation Tiberius Kirk was tracking the raw materials to produce the vaccines, the production of the vaccines, the distribution of the vaccines, all the way, like, from conception to shot and arm. It was tracking literally all of that, which then makes me think it has to be an experiment at that point, right? Because why would you need all that data? Why?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so they're they have a pretty good idea how the bulk of the population will respond. As long as they have control of the media, they know they can sway some things. It felt like the whole lead up, the whole push for the vaccines felt like it was very haphazard and thrown together at the last minute. When you start to see, I think that they had a meeting, and they said, we're going to scare everybody. I think we'll put out videos. People will see the Chinese guy that falls over, or the blood that's pouring out of his mouth, and they'll be scared to death of what's going on. And that'll be good for something. We'll show hospitals overflowing, even though they were filled with nurses making TikTok videos, but it doesn't matter. We'll just say they're overflowing. So we'll create this panic, and we'll create this, and that'll drive a lot of people in. And then that sort of petered out after a while. And then it got into this weird phase where you have to watch Bill de Blasio eat a cheeseburger, or you have to get incentivized by Krispy Kreme will give you a donut a day for the rest of this year. And you go, is this about my health? With donut, like free
It
donuts?
seems like that's about your health, right?
Yeah. And I've kind of joked about this. Like, I've joked that there must have been some big meeting they went to, and the uptake was very low, and it's all the narrative managers and the boss. I have this vision in my head. He's standing at the end of like a big boardroom table, and he slams his fist down and he screams at all his minions that are doing such a bad job of convincing people to take this shot. And he goes, I don't care if you have to promise these idiots donuts, lap dances, or laps around Talladega. Just get them injected, and walks out the door, right? And then all these guys look at each other and go, so does he want us to offer donuts and lap dances and Talladega? I guess that's what we're doing. Because then they left the meeting, and then all of a sudden, all these weird incentives started happening. And you look around, you go, this is not how you would behave in an actual pandemic.
Right.
This is incompatible with logic and reality and reason. This feels like a sales pitch. And if this is the sales pitch, why are you guys like this? Again, just to remind people, your government hates your guts. They despise you. Why are they in such a huge hurry to save your life? That ever cross people's minds? Like, this government that can't wait to find new ways to tax me or make me get a license for. Can you tell I just got back from an anarchist conference? But like, this government that is so oppressive, and they want it. They want to know what I'm doing, and but they love me, as George Carlin, but they love you and they need more money. They all of a sudden, Bill de Blasio is concerned about my health. Why? I get very suspicious when these people start to make my health their business. And then it also felt like part of it was like a humiliation ritual. Let's see how far we can push these people. We're going to tell them to stand on a dot that's 6 feet away from the other dot. I bet you they'll do it. We're going to tell them to go one direction down the grocery store aisles because of COVID. If they had told you, if they had said COVID hovers at right around 4 feet, right around 5 feet, maybe right around maybe 5.5 feet where your head is, that's where COVID, based on the weight, the atomic weight and the structure and the wind and the air conditioning, and in best way to deal with COVID when you go into a grocery store is get on your hands and knees and crawl down the aisles. If they had said that, you'd have gone to the grocery store and people had been crawling around. So I lost a lot of respect for just the general public. Not that I had a ton to begin with, but what was left of it, I really lost it. I really just, when I see that, I just think, what are you doing? You're that scared? So it goes back to, all the great psychological medical studies of before we were born, the Milgram experiment, how people react to authority. And what they found is, 70% of people will do exactly what they're told as long as somebody in a position of perceived authority tells them how to behave. You put a lab coat on. That's why when you watch interviews, you can watch interviews with Peter Hotez, that little elf that's trying to get everybody injected and goes on Rogan. You can watch interviews with Peter Hotez from his home office where he's wearing his white lab coat. Are you treating patients in your garage, Peter? Why are you wearing the lab coat? He's wearing it because it's a psychological tactic to make you perceive him as being in a position of authority. And he's got the lab coat on, and he's got the stethoscope around his neck, and we were playing a little online video poker app, which was like it's kind of like having a group Zoom call, except you could play online poker at the same time. And it was kind of nice, and it would be a 3-hour session, and we'd play poker, and it was good to see everybody because we don't live by each other anymore. And we would talk about, we would just talk about nothing. I remember specifically during one of those sessions, I said to the guys, these are guys that I've known my entire life. I grew up with them. And I said, I don't want to turn this into like a lecture or a doom and gloom type thing or any of that. But I said, I am compelled to tell you guys this now while I can, so that I know that I've said it, and so that my conscience is clear, and so that you guys know that, I know you guys don't listen to the shows I do, and I know you don't read the books I write, and I know you're not into all that stuff, and that's cool. You don't have to be, it's not required, but there's going to be a rush to market vaccine pretty soon for this corona thing that they've just sprung on us. And this is the summer of 2020. I'm saying this. I'm telling the guys, you're going to see a rush to market vaccine. They might even, they're already talking about it in the circles where I'm spending my time. And I know that the general public's going to get it pretty soon, probably next year. And they're going to scare you, and they're going to tell you it's for your own benefit, and they're going to tell you that you're saving the world and all this stuff. And I said, and I just need you guys to promise me before you do that, you'll call me. And just give me 10 minutes to talk to you. Just I have information that you don't have. I'm working off of different source material than you guys are. And I know things about this that you guys don't think about given the jobs that you're in. So just please promise me that you'll call me. That's all I ask. I'll drop it. Let's get back to playing poker. That's it. I didn't get a single call. They all took the shots. Nobody called me. And so I feel what a lot of people feel, which is like if I can't even reach my best friends, I have information that could change your life. I'm not selling you anything. It's not come invest in my pyramid scheme or anything. I'm just, you need to know something that you don't know. They were unreceptive. They were unwilling. Not only that, they then called me up from a birthday party that they had where they all got together. And they were like, Pfizer gang, trying to, screwing with me, just trying to give me a hard time and everything. I was like, and my response is, that's funny. That's funny. I said, you know what's going to be really funny? I said, what's going to be really funny is when one of you dies and your spouse goes to collect your life insurance policy and they won't pay out because you took an unproven, untested, unapproved medical experiment. They're going to classify your death as a suicide and you'll get nothing. And immediately the tone was, dude, we don't want to talk about that. I go, well, you're the one that brought it up. You Pfizer gang, you're the guys that brought it up. So if you want to talk about reality, here's reality. You're going to be ruled as suicide because you took an untested experiment. They're not going to pay out on your stuff. So if you think that I'm wrong, that's fine. I hope I'm wrong. I hope all of my friends make it through. But I know plenty of people whose friends are already dropping. And like I said, I don't want to be right about this. This isn't like I'm going to dunk on you. I just want people to understand the reality of the situation and plan accordingly. You know what I mean? Because this is serious. This is serious stuff. And again, there's this assumption that the three of us know that people make, and that is, well, if this were real, I mean, you guys sound crazy, of course, but if this were real, surely I would have heard about it on my nightly news. They would have done an expose. I would have heard about this. I would have heard about the dangers of vaccines years ago. I've never heard that on TV. I would have heard the dangers of this COVID shot on Anderson Cooper would have done a big story. I've never heard that, right? So, I mean, what are you guys even talking about? Well, here's the problem. And here's the reality of the situation. In the United States, we are allowed to advertise pharmaceuticals on television. And the nightly news gets about 60% of their ad revenue from the pharmaceutical industry. So if Anderson Cooper does have that moment where he decides he's going to come out and spill the beans on all this, he'd obviously lose his job the next day. But the president of Pfizer would be in the president of CNN's office the next day threatening to pull $1 billion worth of advertising unless he got his guy under control. So you're never going to hear about this on the nightly news. So a lot of the people out there that haven't come to this information, they make this assumption that if this were a real thing that you guys are talking about, I would have heard about it. And since I haven't heard about it, therefore it can't be a real thing. And what I'm trying to say is the reason why you haven't heard about it isn't because it isn't a real thing. It's because there's so much money tied to it that they can't talk about it because that money goes away. And you've seen the compilations brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer, Dateline brought to you by Pfizer, Super Bowl brought to you by Pfizer. All that money vanishes. if somebody starts coming out talking about the dangers of these things. So there was a financial component in there. There was a lie by omission. It's really difficult to quantify that, right? There's an assumption that the general public makes that if something as catastrophic as this were a reality, that everybody would know about it, everybody would hear about it. And since they haven't, therefore it doesn't exist. These are assumptions, you know? And look, I make some assumptions too. And I try to differentiate between what's fact and what's fiction. And one of the assumptions we have to make is that the Deagle, like you said, John, that the Deagle report is coming out of some actual science. Do I know that? I do not. I don't know that. So that's why everything is sort of, it's kind of like, here's my opinion. It's subject to change, but based on what I've got right now, I'm very uncomfortable with how these stats line up. And if Deagle is, and Deagle is as a company that sort of works to know what's going to be happening in the future, would they be sitting in on these meetings? Would they be sitting in on, what the Brookings Institute or Rand is talking about? Maybe, probably. I mean, there might be at the Aspen Institute with these people, hearing them talk about this stuff. So between that and also, massive amounts of foreknowledge, Event 201, SPAR's pandemic document. I mean, my goodness, people should read that. It's about 80 pages. You can read that fictional scenario that played out almost identical to reality. That was released in 2017. A lot of people had a lot of advanced knowledge about something that just miraculously came out of a wet market.
Right. That's what I was gonna have you get into too, was that document. But before we get into that, because I think that ties into everything, of course, and it ties into the World Economic Forum. And as John and I spoke about on our last show when we did a show about the World Economic Forum, there are so many layers and components to all of this. It's wild how many layers stack up on top of each other. But you had brought up transhumanism earlier in the show.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you know or whether this is just some online thing, but from what I can gather and from what I've researched, there is graphene in these vaccines. And everywhere on my timeline, man, like when I hate Google, but I use it, right? And I've typed in graphene and studied graphene so much that I keep getting these graphene articles coming up. And dude, the things that they're doing with graphene now, according to like from everything from like microwaves to electricity to all these different inventions and all these different types of uses that they're finding graphene can be used for. And I can't help but to think like there is some sort of connection between the graphene in these vaccines and the World Economic Forum's agenda for transhumanism and how they promote vaccines heavily too on their website.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the ways that they're going to be able to. I mean, how else besides surgery are you going to be able to get this type of technology into somebody? It's probably going to go in through a shot,
Right.
right? And I know it's all speculation of what could come out of that, but I can't help but notice the connection between transhumanism, graphene, and the graphene in the shots, and the World Economics Forum for a future transhumanist agenda um, that they're pushing so heavily on the population. And we know that they're also involved in the depopulation agenda. I mean, you will know Harari's a piece of crap, dude. Like he is. He's
Yeah.
such a piece of crap. And I don't mean to be rude, but he pushes depopulation pretty heavily too.
Yeah.
And he also speaks out of both sides of his mouth. He talks about how dangerous the world is getting with the agendas that himself is like advocating for and pushing. Makes
Yeah.
no sense. It literally makes no sense. But in your eyes and your point of view and from your side, because me and John and I are Christians, you already know that.
Mhm.
And I know like you're open to so many different things. For what do you see happening? How do you see this world coming together the way that it is? Also, like I heard on one of your shows, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but I heard on one of
Oh,
your shows that you even mentioned that these world leaders, like people at the very, very top, they're theistic Satanists. Like they
oh yeah.
really are. It doesn't matter what anybody else believes in. Somebody can believe in Satan, somebody cannot. But what matters is that they believe it. And
Exactly.
somehow they have the coordination and power to do all of this. with such a small, in comparison to the population, such a small number of people, such a small group. Like, like from your perspective and your point of view, how do you reconcile this all working out the way that they want it to?
Yeah, these are people that come from a darkness. You know, they're not of the light. You know what I mean? They're not trying to improve the world around them. They're destroyers. And they write about it openly. I mean, it's hidden only to the extent that we choose not to go look for it. But a lot of these people talk about their relationship with things that are beyond this realm. Maybe they feel they're doing something's bidding. Maybe they've been promised something. I'm not sure entirely. But with regard to the World Economic Forum, there's two things. First, here's the good news. These people on many levels are incompetent. And they can have a 10-step plan for enslaving humanity. But if they can't get past the second or third step on that, then what good is it? So I don't want people to feel like it's all over. You know, when you see Harari coming out there and talking about this stuff, he's selling it. He's trying to sell this idea. It doesn't sell itself. It requires constant maintenance. It's a stain on humanity. I worry about this when you talked about the injectables, you talked about graphene. Bill Gates has talked about self-assembling nanoparticles. There's the luciferase component of it. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, luciferase as a name, that's a little on
Right.
the nose, right? But I think of it like this. We know Monsanto can't patent a tomato seed because it belongs to nature. It was brought by God to create Mother Nature, however you want to define it. It's not Monsanto's to own. But
Right.
if you can make that tomato seed one deviation less tomato, you can change one little thing on it. Now, legally, it's no longer an organic actual tomato. Now, you can own that seed, you can sell it, you can enforce patent law against it, you can create a terminator seed, which doesn't allow you to reuse it over and over again. You can do all of those things to this tomato seed that you couldn't do to an organic tomato seed because it is just one deviation less tomato. I think that they take that same framework when it comes to human beings as well. You can't own a human being right now. We are sovereign. We are beyond. We are our own entity. But what if you made a person that was one deviation less human? And maybe you did that through injecting them with something. Maybe it changed them on a genetic level. Maybe it changed them on a legal basis as well. And
Right.
now because you're not an authentic pure human, you're a nanobot infested human where you've got graphene in you. Now all of a sudden, legally, you're not a human being, and therefore none of these laws apply anymore. You want to sue us? You can't sue us. You're not even a human being. You take it to cow court. You take it to the court with the animals, right? You're an animal to us. And I wonder if that is also part of this plan in the future, is that you are transhuman, meaning you're no longer just a human being. And as long as you're no longer a human being, the rights and privileges and things like that no longer apply to you. And by the way, we can own you. Maybe we can
Yeah, we can hack you.
make slavery great again, right? It will be their new slogan, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're not a human being anymore. So we can buy you and sell you and trade you or throw you in front of a train or whatever. It doesn't matter. The laws that I operate on are based on human laws, and you are no longer a human. I go to jail for you don't go to jail for killing your livestock and eating them. Why would you go to jail for killing one of these transhuman people? They're not even people. So that is a dark component to this that I believe that they have explored. I think that at some point that is I think at some point that is part of their plan. I just
Yeah,
based on the way they view us. I mean, they already think and act as if they own us. They don't
right.
treat us with respect. So if they could get it to a point where legally they weren't required to, then things could get dark in a hurry. So I wonder about that, and I think you're right. I mean, I don't think that I mean, short of like how do you get things implanted into people? Yeah, we've got the Neuralink side coming. You'll get some weirdo early adopters but like you get for any sort of tech thing, you've got a new smartwatch, you'll get certain percentage of the population wants to be the first ones to have it, right? They want to be the first ones to have the Neuralink, but maybe the first generation Neuralink, every time somebody turns on the microwave, you piss your pants. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, who knows? They haven't really worked the bugs out on all this stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
so you couldn't count on the Neuralink being it. It'd have to be a more nefarious, covert way to get inside people's bodies and scaring them all with a virus that probably wasn't going to kill them. I mean, listen, more people died, I think, from ventilators. I mean, I'd love to see the stats on that, but I'd say a very large percentage of people early on that were dying because the hospitals were killing them with these protocols.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's it's hard to know what this would have even looked like without the fear campaign that the media was putting forward and without the doctors and hospitals doing their part to sort of exacerbate the situation and and also the immeasurables, like when you feel hopeless and when you feel isolated and you feel like you've lost your job and there's nothing going on in your life, your will to survive is diminished, and it's hard to measure that, but I think that happened for some people. Some people are still broken. Some people are wearing
Yeah.
masks, driving in their cars by themselves. It's just
Yeah.
the
I
way
see it
it
all the
is.
time.
You see
Yep.
it all the time. Yuri Bezmenov talking about the four stages of ideological subversion. He one of the third stage was crisis, and that if you subject the people to a nonstop crisis for at least 6 weeks, then after that, I can shower them with authentic information. It won't make a difference. It won't ever change their mind back. So some people went through that process and are broken permanently. They don't know they're broken. I mean, they probably are the last to know it, but we see them. We see them in the form of mask drivers. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a sad reality that we really live in, man. And John, I want to let you hop in on here to say something, but before I do, we're talking about transhumanism, making people, you know, inorganic humans. The Bible talks about I throw this out there before. Everything that people have taken concerning the vaccine, it was voluntary. Yeah, they were scared into doing it. Yeah, they were pressured into doing it. Yeah, they might have lost their job if they didn't take it, so they didn't want to lose their job, so they went and took it, right? But in reality, they weren't forced to take it. And that's something that's like the Bible talks about the mark of the beast, and that the mark of the beast is going to be something that mankind has to take in order to buy, sell, own property, eat. They'll have to have this mark. And I see that this seems like a precursor to that. To me, it seems like they'll use all these techniques they just learned about, because I think that COVID itself was the biggest push on mankind as a whole for this type of project. I guess you would say, for lack of a better word. But the whole experiment, like they were able to gather a lot of data out of that and how to probably do it better next time, right? Well, when the mark of the beast shows up, people aren't going to be forced to take the mark. It's going to have to be voluntary. And I think they can use all the tactics that they just used or perfect from now on to get people to take that mark. And I think that mark is going to have something to do with being like a part of transhumanism and making people uh connected somehow, like the Internet of Things, right? Everything's connected to the internet. Every single thing on this planet is going to be connected to the internet. And those who take the mark in the Bible says that they worship the beast. Okay. And it's like a hive mind type of thing. I'm not trying to go all over the place, but what I'm saying is I think that the whole transhumanist agenda has something to do with the mark of the beast, and that eventually those who take the mark, because we got to realize that part of their promise is that these people will become immortal, right? They're trying to be gods. They're trying to defeat death. That's one of their main marketing campaigns. You know, Yuval Noah Harari talks about it a lot. And when you get that promise that you will not die anymore, it reminds me of the Bible verse where it says that these people will seek death and will not find it. They will not find death. Like they're going to be tortured by these things that come out of the abyss, and they will seek death and can't find it. Well, I mean, look at everything right now. We could all die with a gunshot. You know, we could all die by the vaccine right now. But what happens when you go past the point of mortality into immortality for this false utopian promise where you have to worship this mark? This guy is claiming to be a god too, like the Antichrist, right? And just like all these things put together, I see that the World Economic Forum itself is like the mechanical hand to making all these biblical prophecies come true. And I'm not saying that they're forcing prophecy to happen. I'm saying that they're being used by God and by the fallen ones for this type of stuff to come to pass. Like the Bible talks about a lot of stuff that's going to happen, but it doesn't give you the mechanics to how it's going to happen. When I look at the World Economic Forum and I look at these secret societies and I look at all these think tanks and all these different things, man, like I can clearly see biblical prophecy coming out from them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And it would make sense too, because the people behind this are
Luciferians.
right. They view the rest of humanity as disposable. It's a mentality. And of course, also, as you said, I mean, if this is in fact that the Bible leaves it a little vague in terms of the mechanics behind it, well, I mean, here you go. You would need a group of people that thought they were gods themselves, right? You would need that. Got it. Check. World Economic Forum, United Nations, NATO, all these people that they are of the belief that they are superior to everyone else. They would be the ones that would put this in play. Here we are. They've done a very good job. They've made a lot of mistakes,
Yeah.
and thank goodness they have. But I wonder if the unintended consequence of this is that it wakes up a sizable percentage of the population, or the people that said no to this and saw it early on. That group of people, those people are that's going to be the real challenge for them. So again,
Right.
There are so many of us and so few of them, and so we've got them beaten by the numbers. One of the ways that is very effective to play that game, if you're in the minority, is to get the majority fighting with each other. And I think they've done a very good job of that too. We're divided in every way you can divide people, by country, by language, by color of the spacesuit that you're wearing, and age range, social situation, economic capacities. I mean, any way that they can divide you, they've done it, and get you and convince you to say that those people over there are trying to take your stuff. And then they go to those people and they say that those people over there, they're trying to take your stuff. And everyone in there, they want to put you in a cage. They want you to think exactly like they think. Well, I don't want to think like they, everybody starts fighting. So there's some tactics that they use that are effective. But, if Harari and Klaus Schwab is the best that you've got, we're going to win this. We're going to, we should be feeling optimistic, because I don't think that they're sending their best and brightest. And I think that pockets of humanity are waking up up to this game.
Yeah, and I can see that they're like not even. I feel like you know how like we everybody knows about the Rockefellers and the
That people come to this information when they're ready for it. I don't know that everybody's ready for it. I don't know that everybody is ready to process this. I think that good thing. Oh boy, that's a really interesting question.
Because in the conspiracy movement, we've been told, for as long as I can remember, that it would be a good thing if you could flip a switch and everybody would see the world as how, um within the conspiracy culture, how how they see the world as it being, and Alice Bailey, through the externalization of the hierarchy, which is truly what it is. I've read her book now, all 600 pages, twice. um it's a little bit more 600 pages, but it's roughly around there. um that's what she says that it is when the world gets initiated by the White Lodge, of the crimes of the Black Lodge. So you could look at it as the crimes of the current world order versus the patriots in control set up for the new world order. So biblically, we would say the harlot in Revelation, rides upon the beast, and the beast, the Antichrist devours the harlot. So the new world order would devour the current world order. Okay, which I believe is like a Jesuit Zionist, Freemasonic world order. Okay. So, um, we're told that that's a good thing, constantly in conspiracy culture. But as a Christian, and something that I've argued since I came out of being a New Ager, and you have the juxtaposition of the World Economic Forum to the World Future Society, which I've talked about in this program. Um, you know, they're setting up for that. They're setting up because you could say, Hegelian dialectic problem reaction solution. The shots give, everybody turbo cancer. They're already talking about mRNA cancer shots, right? Both in America, and Putin even came out and said they're doing it in Russia too, right?
Right.
So, you know, let's say tomorrow, let's say that, and I'm fast tracking this, but let's say that like Donald Trump resumes the presidency again and really starts like putting the globalists in jail, and really starts, having tribunals, kind of like everything that they've said within the QAnon operation. Let's say that happens. Okay.
Right.
And RFK Jr. is put in position to dismantle the FDA, and like everything that you would think we'd want on paper, they do.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's not a good thing? What if it's the who old boss same as the new boss same as old boss?
Yeah, yeah.
And what if it's just, even if it's not the biblical end times, which I believe it probably is going to be, what if it's just a purging of that guard into something new, but everybody thinks they're taking a collective win?
Yeah.
Is that
would be
possible?
that'd be a real trap, wouldn't it? Because I'm always very hesitant to solve the problems that the right hand of the government created with the left hand of government. I fear, as an example, we see 6 million people, 7 million people, however many people have come across the southern border in the last couple of years. This has got to stop. This has got to stop, right? Here comes Donald Trump. He becomes president again, and he starts rounding up and deporting people to thunderous applause. Well, I don't like that either. I don't like the idea of using the state to solve problems created by the state, and so I could very easily see us getting lulled into some false sense of retribution, like we're going to get these people. But where does that lead you? Where does it end? Where do you
like
we've
where's your hope?
seen we've seen this in authoritarian regimes. Think about Cambodia, right? They come to power. The Khmer Rouge comes to power. They want to get rid of all the intellectuals, right? They get rid of all the doctors and lawyers and teachers and physicists and everybody in Cambodia that's smart. And then what? once they got rid of all those, they go looking for more. Who do they turn to? People wearing glasses, because they just think they look smart. You know what I mean? So you could get yourself in a situation with a Trump comes to power. I'm going to lock these people. I'm going to do to them what I should have done the first time around. And everybody goes, this sounds amazing. John, I could totally see us walking into a trap with that. For sure. Because who do you become when you go out seeking revenge against these people? I mean, listen, there's part, I'm not somebody that says I want to let them off the hook either, but like, if your moral compass gets skewed to a point where you're seeking revenge now on behalf, to right the wrongs that these people did, it's not too many steps away from you starting to right some other wrongs that you have in your head too, that turn you into the authoritarian that you thought that you were fighting against. I could see this ending badly. I'm always a little I always try to, I'm a little careful of my feelings when I get too enthusiastic about something like that, when the trust the plan and here we go, I'm going to drain the swamp, and you go, oh, well, that's great. But aren't you kind of the swamp? You're going to drain the swamp? Are you replacing the crocodiles with alligators? Like what is this exactly happening? So I'm your point is well taken, John. I think it's worth keeping an eye on this. You don't want your behavior to put you in a situation where you become the thing you were fighting against. It's just a different flavor of authoritarianism or something. You want to impose your beliefs on people to get back at them because they imposed their beliefs on you. And it's like, well, are we getting anywhere?
Because Trump says he will be their retribution, and everybody around him, that's what they're saying. And I know you interviewed Roger Stone, and everything, but when he brought up the tape about that he had mentioned that he talking about during the 2020 election about Swalwell and Nadler, and then kind of punting the ball forward and saying, first of all, they're lying about me, but if they did, it's artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And now Trump's using that literally on True Social. Like they're using like they're going to say Trump's involvement in Epstein Island, that's artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Like I when you interviewed him, I wish you would have pressed him on it, because that's concerning in the culture that we live in today. That's concerning, Charlie.
And we're getting into this world where like it's a possible excuse too. I mean, it could be a lie, but you have to go, geez, like in the old days, they had to get you, drug you, or get you in a compromising situation, take pictures of you. Now they don't need to do that. They can just generate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody that's involved in nefarious acts is just going to go, it's AI, right? Of course. I mean, but in some cases, it really will have been fake AI. That's it. We're in like a very blurry time where the bad guys have got a brand new defense mechanism that they can throw out and just, oh, that's fake. It didn't happen. They've generated that. And you have to at least consider it. I mean, it has to, you don't have to give it the same fair weight as every other piece of evidence, but you have to at least consider the possibility that it is fake. And that is plausible deniability for a lot of these people. If they can say, well,
I understand that, but for Roger Stone, I mean, with everything that's against him, it's like, why the benefit of doubt for him, because that's in the plausibility of him to say something like that, right? It's not completely,
oh yeah. No, if there were negative images of you, you'd get the benefit of the doubt because I know you. I know you're a great person.
Yeah.
if it's Roger Stone, I'd be like, well, it might have been him. You know what I mean? I mean, but given his history, I'm not gonna like, I'm not so it'll be a sliding scale for a lot of people for sure. But you and of course the scumbags will be the ones that will use it first and abuse it the most, of course. So it'll be all the worst people that'll be like, wasn't me.
Well,
It's
Trump and
AI.
Roger Stone in their camp are doing it right now as we speak. I mean, he's constantly.
I don't consider those guys to be honest operators either. You know, I
Right.
mean, if you're someone like Roger Stone who has been involved in elections for 30 plus years, you're by default at the bare minimum very adjacent to lying, if not a liar, just an outright liar yourself. And it's just a matter of degree, I guess. And I wouldn't trust Roger
If
Stone.
you didn't know, Charlie, John wants to get him on the show, by the way.
Oh,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, no. I think it would last less than 5 seconds if that was the case.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was one of the few I did the daily TNT show for 5 weeks, and I had 2 guests per hour. And my TNT show went away recently because they said we want you to do 3 guests an hour. I'm like, I can't. I'm not doing that. That's too much. But for that 5 week period, I was booking almost all of my guests. 95% of my guests I was booking. My producer booked, I think, 3 guests for me. Roger was one of them. But we'd had him on our Union of the Unwanted group show before.
did they allow you to press back on him any at all? Because that was my only thing
no, everything that they was all me. If there was no pressing, it was me doing it, not TNT. To be fair to TNT, I didn't love the way they went, changed the format of my show and gave me no choice but to tell them no. But to their credit, they never told me what I could and couldn't say or who I couldn't have on. That's so if I didn't press him in the way that you thought I should, that's a me issue, not TNT.
Okay.
That yeah. And there was no and it wasn't Roger either. It wasn't like we can't, these things are off limits. He came on.
I'm sure. I'm pretty sure he would have hung up on you if you would have pressed him anyway.
Yeah.
And the interview would have
Yeah.
ended right then and there,
Oh, for sure. I don't even think I thought to do that. But also on top of that, I'm not the nature of my interview process is I don't invite people on to argue with them. I invite them on to understand what they're talking about, and maybe I believe them, maybe I don't. But I never really get people on. I certainly don't get them on to be like, gotcha. But with Roger Stone, I was really kind of curious his opinion on things, and it wasn't meant to be like an in-depth analysis of like all the things. I mean, because to be honest with you, if I were going to do that, I would need to have done way more research on Roger Stone to know where he was. And I think that's probably some of the other things that he had done in his past would have been of a maybe a higher priority to me than that. And again, when you
I agree. It's just that he brought it up, if I remember correctly, right? And it was just for him to say something like that. And I know you don't know the background per se of how much they're pushing that right now. That whole camp is pushing it very strongly and had been around that time. And it will happen. If anything comes out against Trump, I guarantee you they will blame artificial intelligence for it. So I just, if anybody, because you were probably one of our only shots to ask him to push.
Sorry, I wish I'd known in advance. Maybe I would have gotten a good question in there for him.
Because he ain't gonna get. There's not gonna be anybody else. There's not. And I understand that that's not necessarily your forte as an interviewer, but I just I was just curious, because for him to say something so, and I know that you are against artificial intelligence. To a point. I mean, we all use it to some degree. I mean, if you ever played a video game, you're playing against AI,
right.
But for you now, again, like you said, they're using it. What's going to stop Biden and the rest of them from using it too? Like, where does this end? Like, does it end to some sort of you have to register with the United States government? Does Trump put that in place? That's another thing too, is by them
Internet
talking
ID.
about that, do they put that in place where you have to register an internet ID to use the internet? That's concerning.
I see. That's very concerning. And I see that as most definitely a push. We saw Nikki Haley talking about that early on, and this that bothers me a great deal. In fact, I have speculated, and to be clear, it's only speculation, but I can envision a scenario in which there's an internet false flag,
Yeah.
where there's something, there's some guy, as an example, and I'm making this up, but some guy goes and shoots up a school, kills a bunch of kids, and the outrage is, we've got to stop this. Why can't we stop this? And then it turns out, well, this guy was in this chat room, and this guy was on X, and this guy was here, and he was talking, he's saying he was going to do all that, but he was using a VPN, and he wasn't using his real name, and he was going by, conspiracy junkie 123 was his handle on Twitter or whatever. And if only we had known who he was, because he was being very vocal about the things he was going to do, nobody could really track him. And if only these things. So from now on, we've got to get rid of VPNs. You've got to have an internet ID to get on. We need to know who you are. It's got to be biometric.
That's concerning. That's concerning.
That's how I see them walking us into that, which is not an authoritarian gun to your head.
Yeah.
You're going to do this, but instead think of the children, John. Think of the children, Jeremy. I mean,
it's like gun rights. The same thing that they're doing with gun rights, basically.
You got it. Incrementally, one at a time. Take away the bump stocks first. Take away the high magazine capacity.
And then you find out the FBI knew about this guy for 6 months. You know what I mean?
Right. Even in my fictional scenario, the FBI knew about my guy 6 months in advance. They'd been radicalizing him. But again, but that's how when you start to see these patterns of how things get done, major societal changes, cultural changes, where you agree to give up something that you had been very comfortable with in the past. You look back at that strategy. The best way to do it is get the people to convince themselves that it's the right thing to do, and you do that through guilt and fear and manipulation. And so when you talk about AI, or you talk about the internet ID or something like that, something bad will have to have happened that in retrospect and under further investigation, they go back and realize that if only we had known who this person was, then X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened. But we live in a world where the internet is anonymous to people that know how to be anonymous online. And we've got to get rid of that. We've got to move into a new paradigm, or else we're just going to have a bunch
reduction
of
of freedom of reach, right?
You got it. Yep. You got it. Yep. And so this is a path that I see unfolding. And maybe Trump is as they say, if you want to really screw over the Democrats, it's going to be done by a Democratic president, right? Obama is going to be the guy that screws over the Democrats the most by doing things that they enthusiastically clap for, and then he levels them. Why would Trump be any different? If Trump comes back a second time, my assumption is that the removal of rights and the real moving of things forward will happen on the conservative side of things, because they'll allow him to do it because he's their guy. After all, he's our guy, right? Our guy is not going to go in there and screw us over and take away our rights. He's our guy. So if he's asking me to do this, or if he's telling me I need an internet ID card, or he's telling me that AI is unsafe and that I have to go through these proper channels, well, I'm going to do what he says to do because we put him in a position to do it, right? He's our guy. But in retrospect, what you will find will be that the only way you could convince those people, those conservatives, to operate against their own self-interest is by having their own guy convince them to do it. So it's not Joe Biden's not going to convince the conservatives in Georgia or Alabama to do something they don't want to do, but Trump could. And so Trump could be the guy that brings in the restrictions that impact the conservatives the most, because in a sense, he would be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And
we've seen that before, though, haven't we? We've seen it with George Bush, I cannot believe how many people thought that dude was a Christian. I mean, he was a Skull and Bones secret society member. He was literally tutored on how to speak Christianese to get the evangelical vote. And of course, when you talk about conservatives, most of them would classify themselves as conservative Christians, right? Even if it's not real. I mean, that's what they, consider
There's a
themselves
huge
or
segment.
label themselves.
You can't say
Yeah,
conservative and you can't say Christian without conservative Christian
yeah,
being a term that's kind of frequently used together. So yeah, it's a
right.
very sizable section of the population for sure.
Yeah, and then through 9/11, we got this conservative Christian president convinced the conservative Christians that their rights needed to be taken away in the name of terrorism.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and they use the same fear technique. Something bad happened. Here we go. Now let's implement these laws. And I can see Trump doing that on a bigger scale. And I don't know how it's going to be done per se, but I can see him doing the same exact thing. I mean, people think a lot of Christians look at this dude as like the Messiah, bro. Like it's wild. And he has a lot of sway over conservative Christians. And with the whole QAnon operation and all this stuff, everybody's so hopeful of him doing what we all wish would have been done a long time ago, put these bastards away in prison
Yep.
for their crimes against humanity. But like that he's gonna I feel like he's really gonna show up on the show, on the scene, and he's going to do something that's going to deceive the nation, but something terrible has to happen in order for him to be able to convince that. I don't know
Yeah.
what it will be. And for some reason in my mind, I keep thinking it might be something more economic, something on an economic scale, like a cyber attack that the World Economic Forum keeps freaking running their mouths about.
Yeah.
Something where he steps in and says, well, we have the means and ability and we have the software to get this back on track or something, you know what I mean? But here's that internet ID, here's that whatever else it might be so that this doesn't happen again.
Well, I think you're right over the target with that as well, because they've legalized bank bail-ins, and
Mm,
you much like I've made the comparison to the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, which legalized propaganda to be used in America on Americans.
right.
You don't take the extraordinary step of legalizing propaganda unless you intend to use some propaganda, right? So if you have legalized a bank bail-in, which is the banks can take the money out of your bank account because it's technically legally theirs, but they took an additional step of legalizing it on top of that, beyond just the paperwork you filled out when you opened your bank account, but they've made this an actual thing. Well, they didn't do that to sit on it, right? They did it because they know they're going to need that legalized at some point. So maybe the potential scenario that you're seeing in the future of Trump overseeing a financial catastrophe could be this bail-in. Banks collapse, they take all your money. The solution that they offer you is a central bank digital currency to bridge the gap, to get you food, get you your rent paid, get utilities, whatever. It's a Fed coin, it's a digital coin. Maybe it's issued by the government, maybe it's issued by your bank. Maybe the bank said, well, we took your real dollars, but we're giving you Chase Bank central bank digital currency, CBDC, tied to Chase. We'll put the same amount on it. We can check your records. We saw what it was. Oh, but this money's fully trackable. This money's fully
Right.
programmable. This money is surveilled everywhere it goes. And by the way, now we've got some, since we are making you whole on this, you're welcome. There's going to be some stipulations. Can't buy a gun with it. Can't buy ammo.
Buy too
Can't
much meat, watch your
may,
carbon footprint.
maybe the way it is set up is that the public-private partnership with the World Economic Forum, their partners group, maybe that's the company's store. The way that the old mining colonies did it, where you could only shop at, they would issue you these credits that were only redeemable at the company store, where you would go in there and buy the things that you need. So they kind of kept it in the system. And I could envision a scenario in which you're given these central bank digital currencies that are programmed in a sense that they only work at the partner groups that are tied to the World Economic Forum, Apple, Google, Amazon, I mean, lots of options, but not your buddy's hardware store down the street, not the farmer's
Right.
market. No, it'll never work there. So maybe it works a little bit. Maybe it works enough to keep everybody going and keep everybody from, the torches and pitchforks, but not well enough that it's actual freedom. And then, and because it's an emergency, they roll that out because it's an emergency. It's like the equivalent of like the Patriot Act, except it'll be like the banking Patriot Act or something. I'm speculating, but again, I'm guessing, but they're educated guesses based on how these people work, and also based on the legislation that they're putting forth that's solidifying and codifying this stuff. When you talk about a bank bail-in legislation, that should be alarming to people. Get your money out of the banks immediately. I'm telling that I can say with 100% confidence. Get your money out of the banks immediately. And by the way, watch how much of a hard time the banks give you. Too.
Right.
If you want to try and take out money, take out cash, take it out in large amounts, woo, they want you to fill out this form. What's this money for? Why is this in your account? Oh, this money just, I had that happen recently with me with a transaction that I was doing, in which the bank called and said, this money just came into your account and now it's leaving. This is very suspicious. I said, well, why are you suspicious about what I'm doing with my money? And they said, well, it's just very suspicious that this money hit your account and now it's automatically going out. I go, well, I have been waiting for this money to hit my account. That's the reason why it immediately went out. If it had hit my account earlier, it would have left earlier. There's nothing suspicious about this. So the way the banks are looking at people, and of course AI is now poring over all of these transactions to see what's going on, but you can envision a scenario in which they have tied your social credit score into your central bank digital currency, and like you said, like, you want to go buy meat, you're having a barbecue, you're having a 4th of July party, and you're gonna go to the store and get all these things in advance, bunch of hamburgers, some steaks, hot dogs, whatever. Well, no. You've exceeded your carbon footprint for the month. You can't buy any of this
Right.
stuff. And if people think that that's crazy, preposterous, futuristic stuff, MasterCard already has that going. They have a deal with the World Economic Forum, and they already have their first prototype credit card that tracks, there's no limitations on it right now, but it's measuring the things that you buy and assigning it a score based on its on the carbon component to it. So if you buy a lot of red meat, that has a certain score. If you buy a bunch of, I don't know, rice cakes or something that does nothing, then it's negligible. But that's already in the process of happening. So it's behavior modification through the use of technology in terms of credit cards like that. And eventually they'll just get you convinced. I mean, if they can't guilt you into it with the climate change stuff, then they'll modify your behavior by just not allowing you to use your credit cards to buy certain things like that, or you sort of have an acceptable limit, and if you exceed that, then it cuts you off. I don't know. It can come in a bunch of different flavors, but it's coming for sure, because that's their plan. And I'm not speculating that it's coming. They tell you
Right.
that it's coming.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the things too, is that when we look at like places like China, man, like they already got all this stuff going
Oh yeah.
for the most part. They already have it. It's weird because like China is a partner of the World Economic Forum, but they're excluded from some things within the World Economic Forum. But it
Well,
seems like,
certainly the climate stuff they're excluded from.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
They're like, we have to
and
save
to
the
me,
planet. What about China? Well, we don't talk about China.
yeah, we need that. We need to keep doing what they're doing. But when it comes to like monitoring and all the surveillance and all the tracking, like they're basically basing their model off of what China's already been doing for a couple of years now, like the last 10 years or so. They just want to implement that somehow to the rest of the world. And I see that if the economy does collapse and the banks right now are collapsing, and the say just the West economy collapses, well, in reality, all the economies are connected together. So
Mhm.
if one really collapses, it's going to start a chain reaction. And I think this is where the one world digital currency will end up coming from. Eventually, it's going to be a global currency,
Yeah.
which will initiate a global income.
Yeah.
That's for everybody. Everybody's gonna have, it's like global socialism or fascism, whatever,
Never
it's
works
just,
well.
it's wild to see what's coming.
It always leaves a bunch of people starving, I
Yeah,
mean, you've
basically
got a
we know that for a fact.
bunch of angry, scared people starving when the government gets in and they say, we're gonna take care of budgeting and planning. I mean, that worked so well in the Soviet Union back in the Stalin times, right? I mean, it's and look, I know we've covered some heavy topics today, and it's pretty scary. But I must say this: it's not over. We still have a say in this. We still can come together and turn this around. And I am of the belief that good triumphs over evil. And I also believe that most people are good. Some people need a little help being better. Um, but most people want what's, psychopaths and sociopaths excluded, of course, but most people want to be left alone. They want their family to be taken care of. They want their animals to be loved. They want their kids to have a good, and they want their children to grow up and have a good life to the extent that they can. They want most of those things. They have to be convinced to want evil a lot of times for a lot of people. So
That's the anarchist side of you, Charlie.
yeah, we could turn this around, I think.
Because from a biblical standpoint, it would be the inverse actually, and that we all are wicked. We all fell short. We're all sinners. We've all sinned against a perfect and holy God. And most people, there are people who try to do good things, who try to do well. The less people who are less depraved than others. I don't believe in the Calvinistic belief of total depravity, right? So there are people who are less depraved than others. Obviously, you have sociopaths and psychopaths who are, especially psychopaths are completely depraved, right? The evil of society. But when push comes to shove, at one time in our life or another, we've all stole, we've all lied, we all have done things that we are not proud of. And there are Christian eschatological beliefs that it gets better. You would see that in post-millennialism or all millennialism. But again, all millennialism was the Catholic Church trying to make things better here on earth, right? A utopia here on earth, right?
Yeah.
And biblically, I believe what we're
After their
seeing.
monstrosity.
Yes, and biblically, I see what we're
Out of the
seeing now
Christians.
is I think as both me and Jeremy are both um, premillennialists, is it's coming to an end, and it's going to continue to get bad until Jesus comes again, and it's going to get worse and worse. And that doesn't mean that we just don't do anything. There's a famous quote tributed to Martin Luther. He didn't say it, but it's still wise. Is it, if the rapture's tomorrow, plant a tree today, right? So as Christians, we're called to do good works. We're not called to just completely just forego everything, and just wait till Jesus comes. We're supposed to be watching for him, but we're also supposed to be preaching the gospel as well as, doing good works as well, too, to show the love of Christ. And I used to believe that we have the collective ability to turn things around, right? But biblically, it's not there. I just don't think it will happen anymore either, because I, you hear it from mostly everyone, even people that we should not like Alice Bailey, for example, with her writings, or Barbara Marx Hubbard. That's pretty much what they say. Now they could be subjectively wrong. I understand that, but it's what that Alice Bailey wants to take your guns away from you, but she still believes in a collective utopia in the future, and I'm not equating you to her, but that mindset is of that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I think that we've got to try to the extent that we can to do the right thing and to allow others to see us and maybe they are inspired by us doing good things. If my choice is, I can't give up, and I'm not going to be a bad guy. So I've got to do the extent, to the extent that I can, I've got to do the best goodness that I can do, understanding full well, as you said, that we're flawed, and also and doing the right thing can be subjective as well. I mean, some components, no, some it's just kind of clear, but in other ways, we're all on a very subjective sliding scale of what I consider to be doing goodness might not be someone else's. When all else fails, take care of those close to you. Focus on them, your family, yourself. Give yourself a break. We're all trying to figure this out. I mean, there's no instruction manual for this.
I would argue the Bible's instruction manual for this.
Well, you would say that the Bible is an instruction manual for this. For me, somebody that is not religious, I would say that it is an instruction manual, but maybe not necessarily mine. Now, that being said, I don't disagree. I just don't know. I don't know that source material well enough to comment on it. You know what I mean? It's not something.
Oh,
that
we
I-
don't. We don't. That's why we love you,
I've been there,
Charlie.
Charlie. You can just
Yeah.
pick up the good book sometime and start reading it. Especially if you start, if you start seeing. I would say this. I would recommend you reading the Book of Revelation.
Okay.
And without the
It'll
Holy
connect
Spirit,
everything that you
it may
already
be
studied.
difficult to understand. I am aware of that. As far as a Christian belief system, as far as the world is concerned. But I do believe that you should at least read it. Of course, read at least one of the Gospels, at least maybe the Book of John, but just because John wrote Revelation too, so it kind of flows that way. But you'll at least know what to look out for. And if those things are becoming true, and it's going to be such on a worldwide scale that it'd be impossible, because you'll have some detractors who believe that Jesus is a myth. They'll say that it's going to be the elite that are going to fabricate all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't think if the elite are powerful enough to fabricate this stuff in Revelation, we have no chance. It really doesn't matter. There is no
Right.
hope. And I believe there is no hope outside of God and Jesus, but there is none at that point if they don't exist. So it may be something that it may be worth doing, because when these things do come to pass, which me and Jeremy both believe that they will, then it no longer becomes subjectivity, then it becomes objectivity.
And then it becomes, I better go grab that book I was just reading. I think I
Yeah.
saw it. I might need to get a footnote off that book I was just reading.
But I mean, because we do care about you, and anybody
appreciate
listening who is not a Christian, we do care. I mean, it's more than, God wishes for none to perish, but for all to come to eternal life, and I used to have, I guess, one last thing, to close out on that. I used to have that vindictive mindset when I was a New Ager. I was a white nationalist. I wanted vengeance. I wanted vengeance against people. I wanted vengeance against the elite. I mean, almost from a bloodthirsty perspective, right? I used to have hate in my heart, and God delivered me from that. And now I mourn. I even mourn when someone as evil as Kissinger dies, because he had no hope and there is no redemption for him. It's gone. It's done. And from a Christian worldview, which I believe is true. So I mourn now because, and I used to, again, and I'm not excusing all the evil that Kissinger did.
No, I know.
But I used to be, if I could pull the bullet, the trigger myself, I would do it. But there's a lot of hate and anger there if you're that type of person, if you're seeking for vengeance. That's why the Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because vengeance will turn you into a horrible person.
Yeah. We see it with them. They hate us. They have become horrible people. That's the trap. And I've had people ask, like, how do you deal with all this stuff? You write about this. It's like really heavy duty stuff, depopulation, and oof. How do you not hate these people? And the answer is that I am a work in progress, because admittedly there is part of me that hates these people. I don't want to come at it from that. I know it's not good. It's not good for me to feel that way. It's not helpful. I've got to evolve past that. But I am I am figuring that out. I am trying to be the bigger person in the sense that, like, as you would, look at Kissinger and feel bad for him. I mean, there's part of me that does. I look at Kissinger and I go, great, you were powerful. And what did that get you? A couple million dead people in Southeast Asia? Why would you want the power if that's what comes with it? You must have had an empty life, Again, not forgiving him. I thought that Henry Kissinger should have died in a prison cell in Laos for his crimes against humanity. But I wouldn't want to be the one to pull the trigger. I'd like for nature to take care of that, however that plays out. But because I do not want these people to continue hurting others, and it requires a level of evolution that I am seeking, maybe, to be a little bit better than that, and not seek vengeance, as you said. I recognize, I understand, and on a mental level, that's not the way to go. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that these people should. I feel sometimes I feel like these people should be made to feel the pain that they've put others through, for a perspective check.
Well,
I mean,
they
Donald
will.
Rumsfeld should be dropped off in the middle of Fallujah to wander around and see what he's done. That was things like that you sort of fantasize about in a way.
That's a
I
very
prefer to have
natural
different
reaction.
fantasies than that. If it's fantasizing about these people getting theirs seems hollow. Like, okay, fine, they get theirs. Now what? Now I'm just a vindictive guy. I don't really want to do that either. So I'm trying to figure this out myself. When we talk about intentionally spiking a vaccine with poisons, that harm people that never did anything to these people, except that they're taking up too much space on their planet. That is a mentality that I have a very difficult time connecting with and understanding. But I recognize that these people are out there, and maybe maybe I don't know. Maybe that's part of my growth in this, is that at some point I will move past despising these people and move into a phase of pitying them, for spending their I don't know if it's the only life we get, but this life doing unspeakable things to innocent people. I don't connect with that, and I hope that maybe I'm able to evolve to a point where I'm not seeking retribution, because I don't think that puts you in a good frame of mind. In fact, I think if anything, it keeps the concept of retribution fresh in your mind and makes you petty and vindictive, and I don't want to live that way. But I acknowledge that I think all of us have had those thoughts, much as you said, John. All of
Yeah.
us have stolen, we've lied, we've done these things we're not proud of. We've all had thoughts of, like, when the Q stuff was going around, like, we're going to round them up and we're going to send them to
Yeah.
concentration camps, and they're like hope porn. You're like, this is fantastic. There we go. Let's
Except it's
do
gonna
all
be
that. And then you
us.
go, well, wait, trust the
You know,
plan.
that I mean, that's what worries me. I mean, they have the system already in place with the camps, and there are, Trump's already talked about that the homeless were the scourge of the world, and talking about if the homeless don't get their vaccines and their treatments, that they're going to be put in camps. That's part of his Agenda 47, so you have the homeless going into camps, you have the illegals going into camps, and you have, Trump has even mentioned, dissidents going
Yeah.
into camps.
Yeah. That's a nice big gray area, right?
Well, I want to say, Charlie, that just to touch back on your last point, like that's the reaction that you have is very natural to these evil people. I mean, what they do, when you think about what they do to other people, man, it's incomprehensible. It's like,
Yeah.
you're just asking yourself, how could you ever do that to somebody, you know? And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, my first reaction to Henry Kissinger dying was like, dang, about time, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was
About
my first
time,
reaction.
right?
It's about time. And but I also I will admit that like after that I kind of I think John corrected me on it, and then I started wondering like, dude, does anybody know what this guy's life was like before he like at the age of 50? How did he grow up? What did he go through? What was he manipulated and brainwashed into?
Yeah.
Who shaped this dude's worldview? You know what I mean? Usually somebody who becomes like Henry Kissinger has gone through a whole lot of trauma.
Yeah.
That's what I think. You know, you got like serial killers too, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel bad for them at all in one sense, but in the other sense, I'm like, you find out this kid's been locked in a cage for the first 12 years of his life and tortured and beaten and raped and all these other things. How do you expect him to turn out? This is
Yeah.
now how he sees other people because of what somebody else did to him,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
it's a deeper level of thinking, but you're right, man. Like how you think about these people, it's a very natural reaction, very natural. Not
Yeah.
even I had it, and I think that it's important to note that like sometimes it bothers me that they're not getting punished while I'm still alive. You know, like
Right.
nothing bad seems to be happening to these evil people, dude. And it makes people question God. But then I have to realize, well, this life is super temporary.
Yeah.
Like, even if they don't get what they deserve here on earth, an eternity without God, dude, is way worse than you could ever imagine
Yeah,
here on earth.
they may be in for something. Maybe that's the reason why they're so committed to trying to stay alive as long as possible because they just don't want the
I
bill
think
to
so.
come, you know?
I think so. Good point. John, any last words, brother?
No, that's all I got. I want to thank Charlie for coming on by their fruits. We'd love to have you on again, brother.
Of course.
I know we got into some deep and heavy topics, and
I would
and
expect nothing less.
and even took it, deep from a religious perspective, from a supernatural perspective. But we do love you, Charlie.
Love you guys too.
And
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for thinking of me for this episode. It's a heavy episode and I don't my disclaimer is I don't want any of this stuff to happen. I don't want and I'm not wishing it. I'm not trying to speak it into existence. I'm just analyzing the things that I found. And maybe it'll make sense to people out there. Maybe they'll connect with it. Maybe they won't. It's okay. I'm not selling it. I don't, but
well, I can give you a little some hope there and some comfort, and that whatever happens ultimately it's God's will, and whatever evil happens that is generated by man or by Satan and his demons, God always extracts the ultimate good out of that. Okay.
yeah,
So, and we know this is nothing that if it does, become as bad as even sometimes I think it may happen, it wasn't anything that, any of us would want, to happen. Especially people, I mean, people got the vaccines, as much as it was difficult for us who didn't, and kind of like the pushback against us and stuff like that. I don't wish harm to anyone who got the vaccines.
no,
I don't wish them to be sick, and I know you don't
no,
either. You
no.
know, so tell everybody real quick where they can find you, Charlie, again.
Macroaggressions.io is the new website. People can check out information about the books and the podcasts. It's all there. And you can follow me on X now that we just got done
For
talking about
now,
how
for now.
for now, it's the most free speech platform ever, don't you know? Yeah, you can follow me at macroaggressions there. And yeah, and if you heard this and you have questions, or if you want to go back and find that crazy episode, it's called "Where Did All the People Go?" I don't remember exactly what number it is. I just crossed into I'm in like number 415 or
You've done
something
so
right
many
now.
now, it's lost. It's
I know.
lost.
I think it's in like the 280, 250 range, somewhere around there. like I said, it's the fall of 2022, so you can kind of go back
Type
a
it on
little.
Spotify, it'll pop right up.
Oh, do
I
you?
listen to
Okay.
you on Podbean.
Yeah.
That's the app that I use.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
anything else to say in
John,
closing, Jeremy?
yeah. Before I go, I just want to thank you so much, Charlie, for coming on. I know you don't know this, but yeah, I mean, I barely know you. But dude, you inspire me a lot. Like the information that you present, I love it, man. Like you're my favorite podcast, and
Thanks.
I listen to you all the time. And that's why I wanted to have you on here because you're a super knowledgeable guy, and you know how to break all this stuff down, um, very digestibly. And this stuff, even though it's dark for a lot of people, it fascinates me, dude. Like I'm all about it, to learn all this stuff. So, and I just want to thank you also for just having an open mind. We didn't have you on here to push the gospel on you or like
No,
to coax
I'm
you into something, you know. I'm just glad that you were here to listen to our biblical perspective because I think
yeah.
we're praying for you and hopefully one day
Thank you guys.
God will open your eyes. Yeah, and hopefully one day God will open your eyes to see how all this stuff you already research it all connects and it
I,
doesn't make sense without the biblical point of view.
Amen.
You know,
I'm
so
I'm
I'm hoping
I'm
that
I'm always
one day.
looking for pieces to my puzzle.
I know you are. I know you are. You'll find it, bro.
Thank you
All right,
guys.
everybody. That's for by their fruits. God bless everyone. And we'll see you next time.